God, Wave 2 is coming out so slowly. Wave 3 is already dropping, people have the figures, and I can't find all of Wave 2 yet. This is quite possibly Hasbro's worst distribution ever. How is the first thing I got a hold of this wave that turd of a leader class Blitzwing? I will never let the tank chode go. I will hate it forever. Anyways, Elita or Elita or whatever her name is, I don't know why I have such a hard time pronouncing it the same way twice in a row. This is a weird figure. It looks pretty cool, and hey, we got a figure of Elita that doesn't suck hard because so far it's been the Power of the Primes figure, which I like, but not for the quality of the figure. Then you got the War for Cybertron one, based on the worst mold Hasbro has produced in probably the last 20 years, and now this thing. And none of her molds look all that much like her. G1 Elita is really getting that typical treatment that we saw for our entire lives, all the way up until the War for Cybertron, where the figures are not designed to be the be-all, end-all version. With a lot of the War for Cybertron, we were like, I guess we're done. We finally have the perfect version of this character. Sure, stuff may come out later that has cool gimmicks or better articulation, or maybe even more one-to-one screen-accurate designs, but for the most part, if you got the WFC stuff, your collection has a representation of the character that you want that is as accurate as you need it to be. Enough to say, I have the definitive version of this character. You know, obviously the Prime characters are getting a bit shafted, but I don't think anyone in this modern day has been getting shafted harder than Elita, who keeps getting figures that just don't look like the poor girl. While I was down for Swolita, that wasn't her. And then you had the WFC version who got a bad eating disorder and dropped like 60 pounds, plus just had the wrong design in general, and now you got this weird thing, and it's like looking at someone you know in a dream. Every detail seems right until you actually stare at it and you realize that none of it is. Torso seems right, but the white on the sides is a little strange, and the pink strip down the middle is missing. Arms seem fine until you remember that they're supposed to be 100% pink with no burgundy on them, and they're the wrong shape too. Legs seem correct, but then you hit the shins. Head feels good until you realize Elita wasn't wearing a helmet. It was mostly kind of robo hair, and it was a lot slimmer than this noggin protector while also expanding further. And overall, none of it's right, but it still does give off the impression of her. I don't know how it does that. It's so weird. And this is so close to being really good, but I have never seen a figure where it seemed like they came up with 1/3 of an idea for what to do with the backpack. These shoulder pylons are both impressively in the way, just gumming up her arm's range in the most frustrating ways possible, and here's the thing, there's never a point where it feels right. The whole backpack doesn't really tab in together. It mostly just kind of rests until it can't go any further. Nothing locks in, nothing on it feels satisfying, there's no clear indication of when you're done moving the stuff to where it's supposed to go, you just have to accept that it is as good as it gets, and then deal with the consequences of the limited range it causes. But they also just don't look any good. Hey, geniuses! If the point of this garbage kibble you got here is to face the way that you intended to have it face, maybe don't have them be completely hollow on the bottoms. Oh yeah, the character looks so cool with giant gaps in the pegs of the tires on top of the shoulders. This is where style is. What I do to make this less terrible is I raise the backpack up a bit and have the bumper section rotated down. This also doesn't look great, but it looks far more intentional and far less hideous than the other version. You can also just commit to her having a dire backpack and just not transform this fit at all. What is it with recent releases and having backpacks transform just to make them worse in the name of pretending the backpack is smaller? Seriously, the best version of this just involves you doing less of the transformation. What a weird, dumb problem to have. And I need to point out that the joints on this thing are uncomfortably tight. Like the shoulders flat out do not want to move ever. It all helps her hold position great, but wrestling her into place also makes her very unfun to handle. Now the face looks both kind of good and also kind of really horrifying. She's got the head of a China doll. Even the box is deeply unsettling. Why is she this creepy? I feel like she's going to come for my soul in the middle of the night. Face is white, while Elita's was always a light pink. They didn't paint the chin, so there's this weird strip of pink underneath the jaw, and I know most Transformers figures have neutral expressions, but Elita's is so much more than neutral. It is completely dead and emotionless. It's so uncanny it hurts. From a distance, this head is fine, good even, but when you inspect it, it fills your soul with a terror and dread previously unknown to man. So the overall look is weird. It's not her, and it also kind of very much is her. I feel like I'm in a horror movie. It has the detail to make you recognize who it is, but the second I get up on it, I realize it's really not them, only to have them unfurl into a giant spider monster and have them drain all my juices. And it's just kind of sad that this is easily the best representation the mainline has ever given her. The Siege version looks like the character to an even more extremely lesser extent, and the Power of the Primes version trends back more towards her actual appearance, only then to swerve off into a massive stylization, which I did like, but it leaves this creepy weird thing as the default most Elita-looking figure ever. As for accessories, she comes with two clear plastic guns, neither of which looks like her gun really at all. The one with the carry handle is probably the closer of the two, but almost every detail is still incorrect. Once again, like with the Siege Hound, and now also Legacy Skids, the promise of combining weapons is left fully unfulfilled. Only those two figures did a good job at it. You can slap these two side by side on a peg, and that's about it. Posability is incredibly standard. Head basically only swivels with a minuscule amount down. Shoulders pull like 3 degrees less than a 90. Pretty good elbows, pulling like a 110 or maybe a little more. Girl figure with actual wrist swivels. Hips are almost unimpeded forward, a bit impeded out to the side, and very impeded back. Normal 90 knees, and feet that only have a sideways pivot that kind of lock in, so you either don't use the pivot at all, or you have to kind of use an extreme one. So this is not really doing good on this aspect. Its best features are above average elbows and the fact that it has a wrist swivel at all, but most of the joints are actually more limited than normal. The shoulders aren't really that concerning, but the hips are kind of egregious, and it's getting kind of rare to find a figure that only has a rocker and no toe up at this point. And the locks limiting the range of them is even worse. And then the transformation is just so very close. It's got some good steps, it's got some fun ideas, but none of it ever seems to want to lock in all that well. Especially the side panels on both the front and back. The front ones just do not want to connect at all. You can't force these into place. And the side ones will only go where they're supposed to for as long as you continue to put pressure on them. At which point if you stop, they will just flex out of place because there is simply not enough locking surface. And I don't know whether or not to count the little car hat as faux forming. But the end result is weird. It's a gappy dune buggy car thing that's barely holding together under extreme coercion with a hat. The wheels ride rough enough to not let it roll well, though I do appreciate how much effort they spent on them. They have the pegs going from the wheel into the part they're attached to instead of the other way around, which makes me question why they don't do this for everything. And the hat is actually an accessory. It's like the car's light bar or something, so you don't have to use it if you don't want there to be any hint of faux forming on it. A weird decision to say the least. The back is kind of conspicuous, but you can use the blast effect ports in the tops of the feet to give this thing boosters. Weird that it has 2 in each foot compared to the typical 1. In fact, in alt mode, this has a ton of blast effect ports. If you remove the hat, there are 11. So I can't help but feel like maybe this was intended for Siege and just delayed forever. It's like a weird non-aerodynamic space car, it's very blast effect friendly, and it just doesn't have the vibe of the waves that came after the start of the WFC. And, I mean, I like the car mode, I like the spacey vibes, I think it does have a cool look, and I think it does feel like what the character from G1 would turn into, even if we know what that was, and it's actually a lot weirder than this. I just don't think it's coming together quite as neatly as it should. This is an acceptable vehicle mode, with some issues. If it could hold together better without threatening to explode apart under the spring tension of regular plastic, I'd be more positive about it. And overall, I think that you can see this one coming. If you've been voting for that one option all this time, congratulations! After probably a year or more, there is finally another one. This figure is weird. It is just a weird damn thing. It kind of looks like the character, if you squint or you don't think too hard about it. It's enough to trick you for the most part at least. It's got a terrifying head that wants to eat souls. It's got at least 2 large accessories in the form of guns that don't really go with the character, except for one that I think is supposed to be reminiscent of her gun. And she has a hat for her car mode, which I think just might be about the weirdest accessory of all time. She's got a transformation that I really want to love, but the lack of clicks and the inability to hold together in a satisfying way stops me from feeling that emotion towards it. And she's got an alt mode that's not her alt mode, and it sure as hell is not Minerva's alt mode, but because we never get a good shot of it in the show, it is a lot closer to Elita's alt mode some of the time. I mean, it's not accurate to the official concept art by Flora O'Deary, but based on what we saw in the show, it's good enough. So yeah, it's a weird figure, and not in a particularly good way. It's not awful, this isn't something that I feel the need to warn you away from, but it is pretty much pulling a bad stat in almost every category. Appearance, cool enough, but not accurate. Accessories, good, I guess. Posability, a bit bad. Transformation, a bit bad. Alt mode, a bit bad. You can still want this for perfectly valid reasons, as a representation of this character who actually looks at least a little like the character, who scales well with your other figures, just because it's one of the rare girl formers, just because it's a new unique Autobot. Just don't expect it to blow you away, cause it's weird. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.